Thank you very much, Mitzi. It's wonderful to be here. The president of the University of Toronto, David Naylor, is a dear friend as well as a colleague, and every time I can be near him, it's a bonus. And he, as you know, loves this city. He speaks about this city as a joy in his life, and you can feel the energy of the place. And I'm delighted and honored to be here. It's odd that I'm speaking to you as a keynote. There's so many experts in the room, and of course David, who is here and will chair the next panel, is a real university president, as you've probably already detected from my Brooklyn accent. I come to the presidency of a university through a strange route. I won't describe that to you, but needless to say, my family is still quite surprised that I'm doing this. And then you're going to see a genuine NYU scholar in our Steve Koonin. We're very proud of Steve, who came to us to head the initiative to which Mitzi referred. He's an extraordinary scholar, was the provost at Caltech for 9 years, and then our Undersecretary of Energy in the United States. We were delighted to get him. I'm going to try to give some top-level remarks, kind of setting a context for what you've been doing yesterday and today, and situated at the interstices of where universities and cities connect. It's a kind of interesting mandate for me. Our university is moving up to its 200th anniversary. When we were created by a man named Albert Gallatin. Albert Gallatin was Jefferson and Madison's Secretary of Treasury, to this day the longest-serving Secretary of Treasury in the United States. And then he went as ambassador to France and finally to England. And when he was ambassador in England, he became very good friends with Jeremy Bentham, the great economist. And the two of them began to speak of their country's great universities at the time, Oxford and Cambridge, and the Ivy Leagues in the United States. And they noticed that these universities were all withdrawn. They were all out in the country. At the time, if you can visualize New York City, Manhattan had not yet expanded to where 20 years after our founding, the grid would be laid down, the grid from 14th Street up north, where you have the avenues and the streets, and you can pretty much find anything by doing a horizontal and a vertical. And it was still down by the Battery and where NYU is, which is Washington Square Park. That was the country. In fact, the north of Washington Square Park, we still had the row houses that were the summer homes of the wealthy. And Gallatin and Bentham observed this about their countries, and they said, there are huge changes happening. There's the Industrial Revolution, the emergence of the merchant class, the development of democracy that requires an educated, broad-based citizenry. We should develop universities that reach out of the narrow birthright elite and that are out in the country doing contemplative, abstract thinking, and bring universities in to this mix. And I remember we were not conscious of this so much at NYU when I took this assignment in 2001, May, before 9/11. And I remember reading this letter from Gallatin to Bentham in which he said we should create universities that are, quote, in and of the city, close quote. And thus University College London and NYU were born as paradigm shifts. And this is very much at the soul of our university. Now, when just 6 months into my time in this assignment, 9/11 happened, I remember convening the deans. It was a Tuesday, 9/11. I convened the deans on Wednesday, and I said, look, this isn't a time for strategic thinking, because there are too many variables. There could be 5 more attacks in the next week. There were a lot of unknowns at that point. I said, but there's one known. Henceforth, I don't want us to refer to ourselves as New York University. I want to refer to ourselves as the New York University. I want to affirm our connection with New York. So within a week, we had signed a lease on additional space in downtown New York, south of us, right across from the site. And we were the first to break ground on a new building in New York, right where we are in Greenwich Village, the New York University. And now we have, and we've done this, by the way, in partnership with the University of Toronto and other partners, but we have created, I'll talk about this a bit, a university that's in and of the world. And NYU now is completely ecosystematic with New York City and is increasingly ecosystematic with the world, and I'll talk a bit about that. Before I do, I want to put some premises on the table which are, I think, they animate both our thinking as a university and your thinking as you go through your agenda. A couple of premises about the large trends that one sees if one looks out at the world with a careful eye. The first thing is that one sees, and Toronto's Richard Florida has written about this a good bit, but I was, even before I discovered Richard's work, I had begun to speak and write in this way myself, and others, of course, have done as well. The world is developing what I call an organic circulatory system. So if you think the Italian Renaissance, and you think Milan and Venice and Florence and Rome, and the way the talent class and the creative class moved among those cities, and you just now change the nouns. And instead of Milan and Venice and Florence and Rome, you have Shanghai and Abu Dhabi and London and Toronto and New York and so on. The talent class is moving in this organic circulatory system, much as it did in the Renaissance. The second large trend one sees is the miniaturization of the world. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it took me roughly 36 hours to get from Indianapolis to here, because of the storms, and there was some doubt as to whether I'd get here, and the talk had to be moved around, and so on. The fact of the matter is the world has miniaturized, and in everything from transportation to communication to culture to everything else. And there, as we just discovered with the economy, as we're discovering with the economy, as the American election is likely to turn on the euro, for example, there are no gating strategies. You can't gate out finance, you can't gate out people, you can't gate out ideas, for sure. So there are no gating strategies. So in a way, this is a step beyond the relative homogeneity. A Florentine would never admit that the Milanese were like them, but the relative homogeneity of the Renaissance, we've now taken it. The whole world is in the lives of the whole world. And so this raises then two what I call axial questions. These are, you come up against these questions, my doctorate is in religion, so I think in terms of millennia, centuries are small time bites. So once a millennia, you come against these axial questions, but we happen to be in what many would call the second axial age. Having created individualism out of tribalism, we now see individualism robust, and the question is, can we create community of communities in the face of such individualism? So the axial questions are, is the circulatory system going to work? Are we going to allow it to work? Is there going to be blockage in the veins? And secondly, how are we as humans in communities going to react to this miniaturization and circularization? Are we going to react as Americans tend to, out of nativism and ethnocentrism and fear, or are we going to see it as a great, I'm going to use a word here that's drawn from my own religious background, because I was instructed deeply as an intellectual matter by Pope John the 23rd and the ecumenical movement in the Catholic Church, where he taught us, having grown up as children, being taught we had the truth with a capital T, and that even the holiest person I ever met, my wife, who was Jewish, had no chance for salvation because she hadn't been baptized by a Catholic priest. It wasn't even good enough if you were baptized by an Anglican, we were taught in the 1950s. John the 23rd taught us that we could understand our own religion best if we understood other religions and their truth and saw the world not through the one window we were given, but through the many facets of a diamond. And are we going to react to this miniaturization of the world that way? And here is where cities come in, because cities are the nodes of the circulatory system. They are the dots on the matrix. They are the idea capitals. They are the catalyst cities, as you referred to them. They are the magnetic poles of power. Now, the characteristics of these cities, as one looks at them, are quite interesting to observe. Because if you flow from the two premises I've used, the centrality of cities is evident, but the centrality of universities is evident, and the necessary synergism of the two becomes overwhelming. In the 20th century, what the urbanologists used to call FIRE, finance, insurance, real estate, was enough. Our mayor, we're blessed with this extraordinary man and leader as our mayor. And our mayor, to give you an idea of how rare he is. I've met very few leaders who are willing to look beyond the immediate, because we've created a culture where we live quarter to quarter. Immediate gratification is the essence of contemporary life. I teach a course called Baseball as a Road to God, which is, and I'll say I have a book coming out on this next January. And the way baseball is a road to God is it's a wonderfully particular sport. A 1-0 count is different from an 0-1 count. An 0-1 count with a runner on base, depending on the base, is different from the previous. And the pitch, and if one lives slow, but we don't live slow. We have no appreciation of the slow, the observation, the beauty that 100 yards down Bright Angel Trail at the Grand Canyon, you've moved out of recorded history. But we live quarter to quarter. Bloomberg, in February 2005, he was up for election the following November, had me run a retreat, a 2-day retreat for his commissioners. Not on the election, but on what would make New York City a great city in 2050. His commissioners kept saying, we're not going to get a chance to say anything about this if we don't win the election. And he said, we're going to think the long term. We're going to plant trees under which others sit. And it was going over to that conference that I wanted to come up with a phrase that caught what was necessary to supplement FIRE, finance, insurance, real estate, in this new age, this axial age, to create the kind of cities that could be the right kind of nodes for the matrix. And I said, you have to supplement FIRE with ice. Now, people think that's a reference to the Nordic myth or to the Robert Frost poem. It's actually a reference because my wife was the head of the foundation created by the wealth of the man who founded Revlon. It's actually because his most famous lipstick was Fire and Ice. But Fire and Ice became a mantra for Mike Bloomberg, and supplement FIRE with ice, the intellectual, the cultural, the educational. Because that will magnetize the talent class. So the characteristics of the city of the future will be, first of all, that they will have fire and ice, and second, that they will embrace this circulatory ecumenical world. They'll live in a way beyond sovereignty. They'll think of themselves as elements in a larger frame. Now, through my wife and his, and this may get me in trouble here, I know, but I stick with my friends. I became good friends with a man whom I admire and who, regardless of what one thinks of his governmental policies, is a thoughtful man, a man named Gordon Brown. And when he was still PM, he and I were sitting and having breakfast, just the two of us, and I said to him, we have to learn as humans to live beyond sovereignty. And our leaders have to learn to live beyond sovereignty. They have to think of this ecumenical circulatory system. He said, I love that phrase. He wrote it down. He said, I'm going to use that. I said, no, Gordon, no. I said, this is why your polls are in the tank. I said, John, president of a university, it's okay to say beyond sovereignty. Gordon, head of state, not a good idea to talk about beyond sovereignty, But the fact of the matter is that the great cities, the great idea capitals of the world will embrace their role in the circulatory system. They'll embrace their role in the ecumenical world, and they won't have to own everything. And this is a key, it seems to me, at so many different levels. And here I'll make a connection to universities. Because if you think about it, cities and universities are both, at their essence, what I call talent communities. And the more talent, the greater the city. The more talent, the greater the university. So you can name talent. In academia, a man named Russell Hardin, who's a political scientist, he was at University of Chicago. He came to NYU about 10 years ago. And he created, in terms of faculty building, he created two phrases. He said there are the cosmopolitans and the locals. The cosmopolitans are the faculty members that have enough talent that they could be at any university in the world. Or at least at a university better than the one they're at. They have mobility. The locals are the people that are at the best university they're ever going to attend. And the key, of course, because one could think of the same thing in building a city. The strategy, whether you're a city or a university, is how do you magnetize the greatest proportion of cosmopolitans for your population? Because the cosmopolitans, they're the people that have the choice to be someplace. And they're the people that create the opportunities for everyone. And whether it be in a city by creating a business, or whether it be in a university by bringing in good doctoral students, or creating a great program, like the program you're going to hear about from Steve Koonin in the next panel at NYU. And others then follow them. They magnetize other people. And they elevate the lives of the locals. And the greater the proportion you could have of cosmopolitans in your city or on your faculty, the better off you are. So the strategy for both a city and for a university is remarkably similar. It's a question of how do you create attractors that magnetize the cosmopolitans? And how do you eliminate the distractors? So the attractors, it strikes me, this is one of the things that I said to Mike's crowd. They were focusing on biotech at that time. It was all about biotech, which is important. I love biotech. We've just built a huge genomics building. We're doing this thing with the University of Toronto and Carnegie Mellon and Warwick and IIT Bombay that you'll hear about. Biotech, I love it. Even though I'm a lawyer and a theologian, I love it. I don't think it's everything. When you read Baseball as a Road to God, you'll see I'm worried that we'll have all this great technology and no souls. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to bring in a great genomicist or a biologist or a neurologist, they don't want to talk all of their time to other genomicists or other scientists for that matter. And their spouses certainly don't want to. And their children don't want. So you've got to create a life for them. It starts with the ice, the cultural, the educational, and so forth. And then after you have those attractors, which of course you have to have the good biotech people, but after you have those attractors, then you got to get the distractors out of the way. And what are the distractors? The distractors are things like infrastructure and the environment and the education and the housing and all the other things that come with cities or universities. And in a way, what you have to do as well is create the right marriage between cities and universities. And of course, what we've learned in New York is how important the leadership in the city is to that. Both the leadership in the universities, and by gosh, you've got that, I can tell you that, and the leadership in the city government. And that you know Toronto, I know New York, I know we're blessed, I hope you're blessed because you're good people. So we've taken this vision, and I'm just going to give you the 2-minute version of this because Mark thought it'd be a good idea if I only used about 70% of my time and gave some time for questions, and I'm delighted to do that. NYU has taken that, and what we've done in the spirit of Gallatin and Jeremy Bentham, who created a new form of a university, you will discover that we've created a new structure of a university. So NYU now, we went through various phases on this, but we're in New York. So New York is a world city like Toronto. New York is, at least it was 5 years ago, I don't know if it still is, the only city in the world that could say that in its public schools, every country in the world was represented by children born in that country. And literally that there was a neighborhood for every country in the world. So we really are, in a way, the first experiment in this miniaturization. And NYU doesn't have a campus. I don't know, don't think of us as Columbia. Columbia's got a beautiful campus. You go through gates, you have blades of grass. We have a different kind of grass. We're downtown, and we have no gates. And most of our buildings aren't next to each other. We're not like UT. You don't come to NYU unless you're really ready to be in the world of complexity and take as a collateral to your. We've got all the things you would expect a great research university to have. One of our guys won the Nobel Prize in economics this year. He's the third of our economists to win the Nobel Prize in the last 10 years. We've had 8 Nobelists on our faculty in the last 10 years. We got that stuff that you expect. But most of all, you would come to NYU instead of coming to UT or Harvard or Oxford because of 2 things. The education you can't avoid getting in complexity, and this structure we're creating, which we call the Global Network University, which flows just automatically from what I've just said. So if you're a student at NYU, the first thing you have to decide is from where. So let's say you're a student in Toronto, and you've decided to look at NYU. First thing you have to decide in the application is what doorway do you want to enter? We have 3 doorways you can enter from anywhere in the world. By far the biggest doorway, the front door, so to speak, or the main door is New York. And about 80% of our human capital by 2020 will enter through New York. About 10% will enter through Abu Dhabi, where we have a 3 million square foot campus under construction in a partnership with the government there. And about 10% of our talent will enter through Shanghai, where we have a similar campus under construction there in partnership with the government there. The only university from outside of China authorized and supported by the government. So which doorway do you enter? And then when you enter, whether you're in professional school or graduate school, and a fortiori if you're an undergraduate, each semester you have to decide on what continent do you want to study. Because we have 16, if you count the 3 I've just named, because for Abu Dhabi, New York is a study away site, and for Shanghai, Abu Dhabi is a study away site, and so on. But we have a total of 16 study away sites on 6 continents. So you have to sit down and decide, do I want to study this next semester in London or Prague or Tel Aviv or Accra, Buenos Aires, Sydney? And you literally we move around continent to continent, all with NYU professors, all with NYU courses in a seamless way. We're the first movers in this. It's challenging. It's got all kinds of challenges. You have to make sure that you can maintain your values. The faculty takes very seriously the appointments because the faculty circulates, so they're going to be next door to them. We take very seriously the admissions. In fact, it's far too. We're one of the 20 most selective schools in the United States with our New York doorway, but of every 50 students we accept in New York, only the top 1 would get into Abu Dhabi. And Shanghai, which will open up next year, will be similar. We now have 450 students in Abu Dhabi. The provost of Abu Dhabi, Fabio Piano, is here, a great scientist who has co-located his genomics lab in New York and Abu Dhabi and works back and forth in that circulatory system. But he now has under his aegis 450 students, 3 years of 150 as we build up. Strongest student body in the world. A third of them had perfect SAT scores this last year. We had 15,000 applications for 150 spots. 89 countries represented and 450 students. And Jeff Lehman, the former president of Cornell, who is going to be the vice chancellor of NYU Shanghai, which will open up in 2013, expects a class of similar quality. Although there we'll have 50% Chinese, although of the 9 million students that will take the Gaokao exam in China next year, we will choose our students by virtue of the government's placing us on the top tier from the top 60,000. And then half of the class will come from around the world, as it does for Abu Dhabi. So we haven't compromised the quality of the students. The faculty is extraordinary, but you have to worry about that. You have to worry about the values, academic freedom and governance and access, all of the things you worry about. You have to worry about infrastructure, little things like when you hold meetings. You know, Abu Dhabi works pretty well. If you hold a meeting at 8 a.m. in New York, it's 4 p.m. in Abu Dhabi. But 8 a.m. in New York is 8 p.m. in China. So you have to, if it goes to 10 a.m. in New York, it's 10 p.m. in China. So you have to alternate those meetings. And the academic calendar, you know, we have our academic calendar in the United States. Now you add to that Ramadan, you add to that Chinese New Year, it begins to get interesting. Because you want mobility. Remember, they have to move around. It's not, you can have, these are not branches. This is a circulatory system. Compliance, taxes, all of these things become big. The overlay of technology. Jeff was the chair of the Internet 2 board. I've just succeeded him on that board. NYU is in the greatest parallel with Internet 2 as we develop the second version of the Internet, because we've got to knit together our campuses. It's fun. And probably the best example of it you're going to hear about from the panel, which is the Center for Urban Sustainability and Progress, which is a cooperative effort with the University of Toronto that was spawned in part out of our admiration for Toronto, but in larger part out of my admiration for David and Jared Cohn of Carnegie Mellon, whom we both admire. And Steve Koonin will be running that. So I'm going to end there by saying simply this. Believe me, in 1981, when I made a decision, I was clerking at the Supreme Court of the United States. New York City probably still had the 10 leading law firms in the world. There were 32 law clerks clerking that year. It would have been natural for them to go to those top law firms. Not one did other than me. And I had to because of my accent. I couldn't have been understood anywhere else. Okay, but every one of those 31 clerks avoided New York because of the state of New York at that time. Just emerging from bankruptcy, crime capital of the world. And we understand at NYU that a lot of our success over the 30 years since has been because of the environment in which we operate and the leadership of the city and what changed. So the biggest message I have to you is that the great cities of the world need great universities. The great universities need great cities. And together, if we keep in mind the overall context in which we're operating, which is this axial moment where literally how humankind evolves is at stake. Are we going to evolve as a warring class, or are we going to evolve in a way that really does mean progress generation to generation the way we all hope it does? That's going to turn on the synergy between between cities and universities. With that, I'll stop and take maybe 1 or 2 questions if you have any. Thank you very much. No, they have microphones, so if you just raise your hand, I think they'll. But if there are no questions, that's fine. I take it, okay, you're ready to go to this panel, which is what I would do. Anyway, I'm going to have to run. My academic gown has on it a circle with the number 42 in it. Those of you that are real fans of American baseball understand that that 42 stands for a great man and a great ball player, Jackie Robinson, the first black to play in American baseball. Jackie had the wisdom, well, I should say, Jackie's wife, because she was already his wife, had the wisdom to go to NYU, where she got a PhD. Her name is Rachel Robinson. And tonight is her 90th birthday, and 12 of us are giving us her birthday party back in New York. So I've got to run right to the airport. So do I turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor? God bless you all. Thank you.